If there's anything that the last few chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen have made abundantly clear, it is that Gege Akutama loves his Toji Maki parallels. In the last 7 chapters alone, we have seen a whopping 6 panels directly comparing Maki Zenin to her late relative, Toji Fushiguro. Seriously, this series is laying this parallel on thick. Recently, after exercising the vengeful curse Noya Zenin, Maki is even said to be on par with Toji Zenin. Maybe Gege just misses drawing Toji, but I am willing to bet good money that it is not that. These constant mentions are supposed to get us thinking about the parallels between the two. But with those parallels comes an age-old question. After all of the development Maki has recently gone through, is she stronger than Toji? That is what we are here to find out. Why the comparisons? First though, a word on comparison. It's important to know why Maki and Toji are so often likened to each other, and it really just boils down to one thing: heavenly restriction. Maki and Toji were both born into the prestigious Zenin clan, but were regarded as failures because they were born into the same unusual condition. Heavenly restriction is a state in which a sorcerer is born lacking something. In Toji's case, cursed energy, and in Maki's, a cursed technique, in return for an improvement in something else. For both of them, that something else is immense physical strength. While we know that Maki's heavenly restriction resulted from her being a twin, we are not so sure why Toji was born with the condition. Because of their family history and heavily restricted bodies, Maki and Toji's similar backgrounds and abilities invite comparison. And as recent chapters have made clear, the stronger Maki gets, the more those comparisons tend to pop up. So, how do they compare? But listen, before we take the series' most recent hot button question on, subscribe to Plot Armor notifications on for the hottest anime content on the platform. And while you're at it, give us a like to let us know that you enjoyed the video. Toji's feats. To answer that previous question, we're going to have to start by taking a look at what Maki and Toji have accomplished. So to start us off, how did the Sorcerer Killer come by his fearsome reputation? We don't know very much about Toji's early years or how he became as strong as he did, so the earliest idea we get of what he is capable of is in the Hidden Inventory arc. Then working as a hitman, Toji is hired to assassinate a high-profile target, the Star Plasma vessel, Riko Amanai. However, even though the target in question is just an ordinary teenage girl, this is no easy feat as she is being guarded by 2 of the strongest sorcerers alive, Satoru Gojo and Suguru Geto. Taking down the vessel would take incredibly careful planning, which is exactly what Toji did. Up against 2 special grade sorcerers, one of whom wielded the Six Eyes technique, Toji needed both his plan and his execution to be flawless in order to succeed. To do that, he spread his plan over several days in which he acted to throw Gojo and Geto off their guard, then cause them to drop it altogether before he ambushed them. And it paid off. He is able to take down special grade sorcerer Suguru Geto and many of the powerful curses he manipulates almost without effort. And thanks to his careful planning and lack of curse energy, he is able to do the near impossible. He seemingly kills Satoru Gojo. And for a man who could take out such formidable targets as those, assassinating the Star Plasma vessel is child's play. Now just take a moment to think about that. This is a combatant whose abilities are so perfectly honed that without a single ounce of cursed energy, only using weapons and his intellect, he is able to take down 2 special grade sorcerers, one of whom has abilities that should make him nearly invincible. He has both the tactical intelligence to figure out how to do it and the physical skills to make it happen. And were it not for Gojo's curse technique awakening, he would have walked away totally unscathed. And listen, even when he does face an awakened Gojo, he is by no means immediately overwhelmed. It quite literally takes being hollow purpled into an early grave to stop him. However, there is one other piece of that puzzle that is worth looking at in a strength comparison, and that is Toji's use of weapons. In his battle with the Star Plasma vessel's escort team, his combat style is largely based on weaponry. We see him use a cursed sword to exercise Geto's curses, stab Gojo with his curse technique nullifying Inverted Spear of Heaven, and expertly handle a regular old handgun when his target is a mere human. In all these cases, Toji uses weapons to compensate for his lack of ability to use Jujutsu. It is a skill that he has pretty much refined to perfection, to the point that when he's resurrected during the Shibuya incident, he is able to effortlessly wield Playful Cloud, a cursed tool that is notoriously hard to fight with on his first try. He also demonstrates a level of awareness and resilience that are highly unusual even among sorcerers. When a sorcerer named Granny Ogami revives his corpse using a summoning curse technique during the Shibuya incident, he doesn't allow his body to be possessed by her grandson's soul. I don't exactly know how he managed to retain his awareness and sense of self when he was not so much alive as he was reanimated by a curse technique, but somehow he had the strength to resist the very technique that was keeping him alive. This one is honestly just as unbelievable to me as him nearly managing to kill baby Gojo, because Granny Ogami specifically states that she only summoned Toji's body, not his soul, to avoid the chance that he could try and retake control. As Toji explains it, his special body is so much stronger than the average humans that even without its soul, which is implied to be the source of his independent thoughts and sense of self, it was able to overwrite the curse technique that reanimated it. It doesn't really seem like it should be possible for a body to be strong enough to act as both a body and a soul, and yet Toji's apparently is. There is no other explanation for it still being alive after he kills Ogami. Somewhat ironically, perhaps the strongest proof we get that Toji is nearly invincible is that he dies twice. And consider who killed him. The first time it was Gojo, who is one of the strongest entities who has ever lived. And the second time, he only dies because he stabs himself. The only people capable of taking down Toji are the strongest sorcerer alive and, well, Toji. And doesn't that just say it all? Maki's feats. Okay, so now that we know what her competition can do, how do Maki's accomplishments compare? Pretty well, honestly. I mean, take the Zenin clan massacre for instance. Single-handedly, and with absolutely no premeditation or prep time, Maki is able to take out the entire Zenin clan. That includes the Hei, her family's most prestigious fighting unit, all of whom probably would have turned up their noses at her mere hours before. The power-up she gets when her twin sister dies, taking Maki's curse energy with her, and effectively breaking the limit on her physical strength, is so great that she is even able to deal a fatal wound to the formidable Naoya Zenin. Granted, she didn't actually kill him, but she did beat him in a fight and eventually exercise his cursed form. When you really think about how much strength, speed, and endurance it would take for someone to win such a huge number of fights in succession, it becomes apparent how dangerous Maki really is. Though Toji could have done the same to the Zenin clan if he had ever bothered, we have never seen him pull off anything on this scale in regards to how many opponents he had to face. And again, I am not saying that he couldn't have done what she did. He more than likely could have, given the abilities that we know him to have. But he didn't, so we'll never have definitive proof of that. There is also the increase in her innate awareness of her surroundings and her opponents after learning from a reanimated sumo wrestler named Mio during the Culling game. She's fast enough to keep up with the vengeful cursed Naoya's projection sorcery technique and is able to use her heightened physical abilities to exercise him. We have no idea what level of curse Naoya would have been classified as if he had popped up during peacetime and someone had been around to rank him, but it is evident by the attacks he is capable of that he is an absurdly powerful cursed spirit. I would even say that Maki being able to hold her own against him is arguably comparable to Toji holding his own against a special grade sorcerer. But it isn't only Maki's success against difficult foes that speak to her strength. Awareness is another area in which Maki is almost unparalleled. She is so in tune with her surroundings that she can use the flow of air around her to her own advantage and can see the souls of objects. An ability so powerful and mysterious that I don't think we even fully know what it means yet. Like seriously, what is the soul of an inanimate object? Gege, explain. Not only does she have a weapon on par with Toji's inverted spear of heaven in My Sword, which lets her cut through anything regardless of its hardness so long as she can see its soul, but her body itself is now a perfected weapon. It's hard to compare those accomplishments to Toji's probably because their jobs and goals are nothing alike. Remember, Toji was a contract killer while Maki is a jujutsu sorcerer. Toji's job required him to build up immense strategic skills that none of Maki's greatest accomplishments had ever required of her. Maki was not only trained to fight curses instead of humans, but her most notable battles were totally unplanned. Of course, the scope and nature of their respective accomplishments wouldn't be the same, so feats alone aren't enough to measure their relative strength. In that case, what should be? So, who is stronger? Oh boy, this question is not only hard to answer, but more than a little contentious. But as it is the central question of this video, we are going to take a crack at it. The main problem in any who's stronger debate is that combatants often have different strengths. And even though Toji and Maki are similar, I would say that is true of them too. So I think the best way to compare them is to look at a few different areas that contribute to their respective strengths and see who comes out on top in each one. It's pretty tricky to compare their physical strength as both of them have gone so far beyond normal human limitations that it's hard to put them on a scale. My gut says that Toji has Maki beat a little bit in that area, but that is not a very objective assessment. So what would be the best way to assess their strength? One way we could try would be to look at their most notable kills. Toji's most memorable triumph by far was of a young Gojo, who though not awakened yet, was already unimaginably powerful. We have been through this one in quite a bit of detail already, but what bears repeating from the earlier summary is just how much planning it took to make that happen. Toji would almost certainly never have gotten close to Gojo if he hadn't figured out a strategy to wear him down and get him to drop his guard. That is a level of strategic prowess that we definitely don't get in Maki's most notable kill. that of the entire Zenin clan, including Naoya, in the form of a vengeful curse. Maki had no previous intention of committing that massacre until she witnessed her sister's death, and therefore, no plan. She didn't demonstrate Toji's ability to devise intricate and effective strategies because, well, she didn't have to. Maki could just straight up barge in, kill dozens of highly trained and ranked sorcerers, and get out. And while I don't doubt that an awakened Gojo is as powerful as all of Maki Zenin's adversaries combined, his younger self was a much easier target, not because he lacked power, but because he lacked experience. A young Gojo would never have been on guard against a bodily attack because at that point, he still seemed to think he was invincible, and that made Toji's otherwise nearly impossible job much easier. While Toji could have very likely massacred these Zenins, he didn't, and that makes Maki's most astonishing feat just a little more astonishing than his. She gets this point. There is also the matter of intellect, and unlike the last category, this is one that Toji takes handily. Not only does this would-be murderer of Baby Gojo demonstrate his incredible tactical mind, but as an assassin, he relies on those tactics in ways that Maki, as a sorcerer whose jobs don't rely on stealth, don't really have to. However, Maki definitely still has him beat in perception. The potential that Maki's newly heightened senses give her is absurd. And while we don't actually know if Toji's heightened sensory awareness means he's ever learned to sense his surroundings or the souls of people and objects in the same way, we have no confirmation that he did. That means that Maki has a skill that lets her read her opponent almost flawlessly, one which Toji probably lacked. This is another huge point in her favor. Weapons are another point you kinda have to touch on when comparing the two. They are both expert users of cursed tools, but this is one I would give to Toji too, because as a human assassin, instead of a Jujutsu sorcerer, he had to become exceptionally proficient with conventional weapons as well as cursed tools. While I don't doubt that Maki would probably be able to hold her own if she ever had a reason to pick up a conventional weapon, I also don't think we're ever going to see her with a gun. That's no knock against her, it's not her style, but it is a skill that Toji has which Maki doesn't. Combined with the feats we see him perform with cursed tools, I think this one has to go to Toji. And furthermore, who knows what feats we didn't witness. I'm pretty sure his cursed wound buddy held a lot more weapons than we ever saw him use. So at this point we are 4 categories deep, and we have a tie. Toji has the upper hand in tactics and weapons handling, and Maki's situational awareness and on-page feats top his. This last category is going to swing the score one way or another. So what is it? Now hear me out on this last one because it might sound a little crazy, but I think we really need to look at mental strength. When I say mental strength, I am talking about resilience. The ability to persevere through extreme emotional and mental strain. The ability to persevere through extreme emotional and mental strain. Ridiculous, I know, but think about how important that really is. Nearly everyone in this series is traumatized, and the Zenin clan's most famous outcasts are no exception to that rule. So to an extent, the best sorcerers are the ones who can take the most hits mentally and emotionally and continue moving forward. You can't be effective at exercising curses if you are so mired in grief that you can't function. And in that sense, Maki wins this last category by a landslide. Both Toji and Maki were sent down their current path by a tragic loss. For Toji, the loss of his first wife, and for Maki, the loss of her twin sister. But how did they handle that? Very, very differently. For Toji, becoming a widower unmoored him. It's said that her death was the catalyst for his increasing instability, eventually resulting in him becoming a contract killer. Basically, it sounds like she was his impulse control. But for Maki, losing her sister did nothing to sway her from the path she was on, or diminish her desire to improve. Despite having watched Mai die, she was able to carry out her last wish. Even though she'd barely had a handful of days to process what had happened, Maki was determined enough to not let her sister's death be in vain that she jumped straight into the culling game and committed herself to refining her newfound abilities. In short, Maki finds closure in action. When she finally figures out how Mai wanted her to use the sword that she made for her in her last moments, the two have a symbolic dream type sequence in which it is implied that the two have made amends in death. That kind of closure, in only a few days and from a teenager who just lost her twin, is almost unbelievable. The mental strength it required of Maki not to stray away from the path forward in the face of what I'm sure was intense grief is something Toji definitely doesn't match in his own dealings with loss. Maki finds herself in grief. Toji loses himself in it. I'm sure it's not the kind of strength we often think about when we power scale characters, but it is hugely important. So to cap it off, that is 3 categories for Maki and 2 for Toji. Not so sure if their raw physical prowess lines up with that assessment, but I think we can safely say that if nothing else, Maki is stronger than Toji right now in several of the areas that probably impeded Toji's growth. and that will one day allow her to become stronger than Toji was overall. After all, she is still only 16 and only just getting started. Toji is already dead. He's stagnant and his power won't increase, but Maki is only scratching the surface of what she can do. That said, I think I can confidently say that Maki will someday be the unquestionable winner of this matchup. But hey, whether you agree or disagree, please let us know what your thoughts are down in the comments section below. As always, I'm Celestial Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.